Hi, I'm Rich Harrington, and welcome to this week's edition of Understanding Adobe Photoshop, the podcast about getting the most from Adobe Photoshop. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that confuses a lot of people, and that is image modes. Depending upon how you're going to use a particular photo, you'll often need to change its mode. Some images are going to be in the RGB color space, or red, green, blue, if you're using them on screen or the web, or maybe in a presentation. However, if you're going to do professional printing, you might need to work in CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and key being black. And of course, there's all sorts of other specialty modes like lab color or duotone or grayscale. Pretty quickly, they get overwhelming. Well, today, we're going to take a quick look at each of them and walk you through why you would use a particular image. Let's explore. Now, we're using a photo here. You're welcome to use your own. And if you actually have a copy of the book, Understanding Adobe Photoshop, you're welcome to get the code that will allow you to download these images from our site. I'm going to go ahead and call up the history palette, which will come in handy as we work here. Most images are going to be in the RGB color mode. Now, RGB is red, green, blue, which are the components of light. If you were to take white light and split it through a prism, you would essentially end up with RGB. If you take equal values of red, green, and blue and combine them back together, you get white light. This is exactly how camera sensors work or scanners work, is they use these red, green, and blue sensors that detect the amount of light and then reconstitute it to create a color image. So, this image is RGB Color Space because this is how it was acquired with a digital camera. It's also in 16-bit per channel mode. We're not going to talk about this that much right now, but we'll explore these different bit depths in a later episode. Many newer digital cameras will shoot in 16 bits per channel, and this means more information is being used to describe the color. A 16 bits per channel file is bigger, but if you have the option to work with it and you're not really pinched for space, consider using it because the color fidelity is much better. Now, with the RGB Color Space, let's open up the Channels panel here. I'm going to drag it over so you can see it better. You'll notice that the different colors are being used in this space. If I click, I could choose Panel Options and actually make the thumbnails bigger. This makes it easier to see. Now, look in the red channel here. You'll see that for the red channel, we have a lot of white value in the red channel. That indicates a high presence of that particular color component. There's a lot of red in the red boat. Therefore, this is almost a pure white. If we look at the green channel, you'll see it's darker, getting closer to black, and that indicates that there is a little value of that color. Even though it's red, there's a little bit of green and blue to create this particular shade of red, and that's true with most colors. Rarely will you see a 100% value of a pure color in an image. That's because in the real world, most colors are comprised up of parts of the colors to make a new color. Bits of red, green, and blue formulate that particular shade of red in this image. Same holds true for the green. If we look at the green channel here, you'll see that the green grass is fairly light, but there is a little bit of green also being combined from the red and blue channels. Now, channels may just seem as something theoretical to you, but as you start to do tasks like color correction, or image masking or extraction, channels are absolutely critical. One of my favorite books that's actually out of print is a book called Channel Chops, written co-authored by Bert Monroy. It's a fantastic book if you can ever find it. We do cover channels fairly in depth in my book, and I really want you to understand that channels and image mode are important to so many things that you're going to do when working with Adobe Photoshop. Now, let's change modes. Another image mode that you'll encounter quite a bit is CMYK color. And when we convert to CMYK, you're going to notice some shifting in the colors. Look at the reds and greens as we change modes. You'll see a slight shift in color, and that's because the CMYK color space is a little more limited than RGB. CMYK is used for professional printing. Not really inkjet printers, but the sheet-fed, separation plate style printing, things for annual reports, postcards, large output type things. Now, this works great, and it's what the print industry is based upon. But the printing presses cannot capture the same amount or range of colors that the human eye can see, and certainly cannot capture as much as the RGB color space. But if you're doing professional printing, CMYK will be part of your workflow. Let's go ahead back here and go one step back in our history palette, and the image will go from CMYK mode back to RGB mode. The history panel is very useful because it lets you go backwards in time, undoing decisions that you've made. It's only available when the document is open. Once you close the document, all of those undos disappear. So if you're not quite sure what you're doing or you're experimenting, leave the history panel open as you work, and you'll discover that you have that flexibility to essentially time travel. Now, let's take a look at a couple more modes that are going to be useful. Lab color is very specialized, and it's usually used to do specialty color correction. When we convert to lab color, we end up with one channel that contains all of the detail information, the black and white information, and one channel for all of the red and green information, and one channel for all of the blue and yellow information. This is a very unique image mode, but it has some specialty purposes for really going after individual hues and isolating them for a correction. For example, we can go ahead and add a curves adjustment here, and then work with just the A channel that contains the information for the reds and greens. I could click here and add a little control point, and then grab over here to go after just the reds. And watch how the red boat is changing. I just made it an orange boat, now a brownish boat, and now a bright green boat, all without affecting anything else in the image. The LAB image mode is very special and complex. We're not going to go any deeper with it here, but if you're intrigued, be sure to check out The Canyon Conundrum by Dan Margolis, which is a book all about the color correction modes using LAB color. Let's go ahead and undo here real quick. We're going to go back a couple of steps and go to our grayscale mode. Image mode, grayscale. Now, this converts it to a black and white image by discarding all of the color information and makes it a gray file. This is not the best way to do this, though, and to make a black and white image. For that, you're going to use a specialty tool called a black and white adjustment layer. I'm going to show it to you quickly now, but we've got an upcoming episode that fully explores all the cool things this adjustment can do. Let's go ahead and choose undo for a second, and we're going to add a black and white adjustment layer. I'll click here on black and white. It comes up with the adjustment, and you'll see that we can actually play with several presets, like use a green filter or do a maximum black and really punch it. And we can always play with these individual values here until we get the type of conversion we want. When you're satisfied, you would then choose image mode, grayscale, and you would get the type of look you wanted. And notice how we get that custom black and white conversion. Now, once you're in a black and white, you can actually go ahead to a specialty mode like duotone, but you have to switch down to 8 bits per channel to do it. A duotone is meant for printing, and it allows you to substitute colors here. For example, using a color like a dark red for the black ink, and maybe a very light yellow for the other. Duotones are very specific colors, and you can use these, but there's lots of ways to create them. Again, this is just an overview of your image modes. We'll explore many of these techniques deeper in future episodes. Let's go ahead here and hit cancel, and I'm just going to go back to the original state as an RGB image here and call up that image mode one more time. We have a few other options in here, but they're rarely used. Bitmap mode is just a pure black and white image, and you never really see that anymore. It used to be used for things like icons and Windows system resource type files. You're not going to use it anymore. It's there for legacy purposes. The duotone we took a quick look at, that's a specialty mode for printing. Index color is usually done for web purposes, and it limits it to only 256 colors in the image. That's to really get the file size down for the web. But don't use index color mode for that. Instead, choose File, Save for Web and Devices, and follow the instructions there. All in all, a lot to image modes, but the main ones you're going to see again and again is going to be RGB color, CMYK color, and grayscale. Lots to learn. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. We got more things you could check out over at our blog at rastervector.com, back episodes, tutorials, news, and information. And while you're there, take a look at the special promo on our new book, Understanding Adobe Photoshop CS4 from Peach Pit Press. You can use the discount code UAP2 to get 35% off. My name's Rich Harrington. Thanks a lot for joining me for Understanding Adobe Photoshop. We'll see you next week when we explore setting Photoshop preferences to make the application behave better. Thanks again.